The front gate does not creak open, it screams. Not the kind of sound you expect from a $5 million mansion. The kind of sound that feels like the house itself is warning you to stay out. But we went in anyway. Because this was not just any mansion. This place was once a symbol of wealth, power, and perfection. A property that used to host elite parties, luxury cars parked in a perfect line outside, glass doors glowing under golden lights. A place where every inch was designed to impress. And now, it had been left to rot, completely abandoned, for years. What you are about to see is not just a cleaning job. It is a transformation. But more than that, it is a story about how something so valuable can be forgotten so easily. As we stepped onto the driveway, the first thing that hit was silence. Not peaceful silence, heavy silence. The kind that makes you feel like time stopped here a long time ago. The garden used to be perfectly maintained. You could still see the outline of what it once was. But now, weeds had taken over everything. Tall grass pushed through cracked stone pathways. Dead leaves covered what used to be decorative landscaping. The fountain at the center, once a showpiece, was now filled with dark, stagnant water, and then there was the mansion itself. From a distance, it still looked impressive. Massive glass windows, modern architecture, clean lines. But as you got closer, the illusion started to break. Dirt covered the exterior. Paint was peeling. Some windows were shattered. Others were fogged over from years of neglect. It felt like the house was aging faster than it should. We pushed open the front door. The smell hit instantly. A thick, damp, almost suffocating odor filled the air. It smelled like mold, decay, and something else, something harder to describe. Like the air had not moved in years. Inside, the luxury was still visible, but buried. Dust covered everything. Not a thin layer, but thick, heavy dust that had settled over time like snow. The marble floors were barely visible under dirt and debris. Expensive furniture sat exactly where it had been left, but now it looked lifeless. There were signs that whoever lived here did not plan to leave. Shoes near the entrance. Glasses still on the dining table. A jacket thrown over a chair. It was like time froze in the middle of a normal day, and then never restarted. And that is when it gets unsettling, because places like this do not just get abandoned for no reason. Think about it. A $5 million mansion is not something people just walk away from. There are always stories behind places like this. Financial collapse, legal battles, family disputes, or something even darker. But in this case, the truth was not fully clear. All we knew was that it had been empty for years, and now, it was our job to bring it back to life. We started in the living room. The scale of the mess was overwhelming. Dust, debris, broken pieces of glass, and layers of dirt covered the entire space. The once luxurious white sofas had turned gray. The glass coffee table was stained beyond recognition. But here is the thing about cleaning a place like this. You do not just clean, you uncover. Every wipe reveals something that was hidden. Every step forward feels like you are peeling back layers of time. We began by clearing out the obvious trash. Broken items, rotting materials, things that could not be saved. And there was a lot of it. Then came the deep cleaning. Wiping down surfaces that had not been touched in years. Scrubbing floors that had lost their shine. Cleaning windows that had not let sunlight in for far too long. And slowly the house started to change. Not all at once, but little by little. And here is where it gets interesting. Because as the dirt disappeared, the true value of the mansion started to show again. The marble floors underneath were still stunning. The design of the furniture was still high-end. The layout of the space still felt luxurious. It was like the house had been asleep, not dead. But then we moved to the kitchen. And that is where things got worse, way worse. Food had been left behind. Not just in cabinets, but out in the open. What used to be normal groceries had turned into something unrecognizable, mold-covered surfaces. The smell was almost unbearable. This was not just a cleaning job anymore. This was a restoration. We had to remove everything. Every cabinet needed to be emptied. Every surface needed deep sanitation. Appliances that once cost thousands were now filled with decay. and still we kept going. Because quitting halfway would leave the house in the same state it had been in for years. And that was not the goal. The goal was transformation. Now imagine this. You are standing in a kitchen that used to be worth more than most people earn in a lifetime, and you are scraping off layers of rot just to make it usable again. It makes you think, how does something this valuable end up like this? How does a place filled with life end up completely forgotten? We moved upstairs next. The bedrooms told a different story. Unlike the rest of the house, these rooms felt more personal, more human. Beds still made, but covered in dust. Closets filled with clothes. Personal items scattered across dressers. It felt like someone had left in a hurry and never came back. One room had photos still on the wall. Family moments, smiles, memories frozen in time. But now, those same pictures were surrounded by decay. It was not just a dirty house. It was a paused life. Cleaning these rooms felt different, slower, more careful. Because you were not just cleaning space. You were walking through someone else's past. And then came the bathrooms. If you have ever seen what happens when water damage and neglect combine, you already know. Tiles stained. Fixtures corroded. Mold spreading across walls and ceilings. What used to be modern luxury bathrooms now looked like something out of a nightmare. This was the hardest part of the entire process. Deep cleaning here was not optional, it was necessary, and it took time. A lot of time. But this is where the real transformation started to become visible. Because once these spaces were cleaned, the difference was shocking. The same tiles that looked ruined started to shine again. The same mirrors that were covered in grime reflected light again. It was like bringing something back from the edge. And that is when you realize something powerful. Most things are not destroyed, they are neglected. And neglect over time can look like destruction. But it is not always permanent. We continued room by room. Hallways, storage areas, even the garage. Each space had its own challenges. Each space required a different approach. But the goal remained the same. Bring the mansion back. Days passed. Then more days. Cleaning a place like this is not quick. It is not easy. And it is definitely not glamorous. But the result, that is where everything changes. Because at some point, you walk back through the front door, and it does not feel the same. The smell is gone. The light fills the space again. The floors reflect instead of absorb. The house feels alive. And that moment, that is why this work matters. Because what started as a decaying, forgotten structure becomes something valuable again, something beautiful again. Now here is something to think about. If a $5 million mansion can be left to rot, what else in life gets neglected the same way? Opportunities, skills, relationships, even people. Things that once had value, slowly fading, not because they were useless, but because they were ignored. And just like this mansion, sometimes all it takes is effort, time, and consistency to bring them back. But here is the truth most people do not want to hear. Not everything gets restored. Some places are too far gone. Some damage is permanent. And that is what makes this transformation even more powerful. Because this one was saved. By the end of the process, the mansion did not just look clean. It looked expensive again. The kind of place that turns heads. The kind of place people dream about. And yet just days before, it looked like it belonged in a horror story. That contrast is what makes this story unforgettable. Because you saw both sides. The peak and the collapse. And then the comeback. And even after everything was cleaned, restored, and brought back to life, there was still a strange feeling that lingered. Not fear, not discomfort, but curiosity. Because no matter how perfect the mansion looked again, one question never fully disappeared. Why was it left behind in the first place? Some stories do not leave evidence. They leave silence. And silence can be louder than anything else. But maybe that is what makes places like this so powerful. They remind you that success, luxury, and stability are never permanent unless they are maintained. This mansion was proof of that. Once admired, then forgotten, and finally rediscovered. Which makes you wonder, What in your own life is slowly being left to rot, without you even noticing? So the next time you see something that looks completely ruined, think again. Because sometimes, under all that dirt, there is still something worth saving. And sometimes, the difference between something worthless and something extraordinary is just the willingness to restore it.